True compassion. Christians come together in Texas, rallying around a nurse infected with the Ebola virus. Rapid response. The Synod Fathers react to a preliminary report that some say signals a shift for the church. Global hotspot. Ongoing clashes at the Pakistan-India border. And making it count. Dancing may help girls improve their math skills. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, October 14th, 2014. Good evening from Washington. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick with your news now. We begin tonight with a dire prediction about how fast Ebola could possibly spread. The World Health Organization says today there could be 10,000 new Ebola cases per week over the next 2 months. The WHO also says the Ebola death rate is reaching 70%. Also tonight, a medical worker in Germany is one of the latest victims to die from Ebola. The man was part of a UN peacekeeping mission in Liberia. Spain's government says a nurse infected after caring for a priest with Ebola is showing slight improvement, but is still in serious condition. The CDC says it's actively monitoring 76 U.S. hospital workers who had contact with Thomas Eric Duncan, who has also died. A nurse who cared for Duncan in Dallas was diagnosed with that virus this weekend. Jason Calvi is here now with her story.
Brian, that nurse is fighting Ebola, and she says she's doing fine. Nina Pham released a statement thanking everyone for their kind words and prayers. She's remained isolated in stable condition. The Centers for Disease Control still don't know how she got the virus, but say Pham is aiding their investigation.
She's been terrific at assisting our investigators and going through the steps so we can all try to learn together how to keep healthcare workers safer against the virus.
Nina Pham's recovery is being aided by Kent Brantley, a missionary doctor who beat Ebola. He's donating his plasma. Doctors hope it has properties that will help the nurse. College friends are also keeping Pham in their thoughts and prayers. They'll hold a prayer vigil on the campus of Texas Christian University.
There's a lot of camaraderie, not as much heaviness, just very much awareness and wanting to be together. I wouldn't quite describe it as sadness, but it's kind of this desire to hold on to hope and this desire to come together and to support one another.
Erin Taylor will be leading prayers at TCU tonight. She was in the same sorority with Nina Pham.
We don't know what the future holds. We don't know the answers to a lot of questions. What we do know is that God is with us, and God can do some pretty amazing things in times of crisis and in times of worry.
Pham's family is also receiving support.
Nina, we're doing well, and her mom talked to her.
There was a special mass Monday night at the parish Pham's parents belong to, Our Lady of Fatima Church in Fort Worth. The parish is the home of a close-knit Vietnamese Catholic community.
Her mother belonged to a group we call it Legion of Mary. We have a very long session of prayer.
Family friends say they'll stay with them in their hour of need.
We're here to pray for her. That's just about I can do for her.
Doctors treating Pham say they're optimistic. The president offered his thoughts and prayers to Pham late today. And tomorrow, a Catholic high school Pham attended will organize a prayer service for her as well. Brian?
Thank you, Jason. Beautiful story. And now some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. Church leaders participating in the Vatican Synod on the Family are trying today to clarify confusion over a midterm summary report issued yesterday. Wyatt Goolsby is at the Basilica of the National Shrine here in Washington with more tonight. Wyatt?
Brian, today high-ranking bishops and cardinals have been discussing a wide range of issues laid out in a 12-page summary of their discussions so far. But many of those cardinals and bishops, some of whom are American, are concerned that the language in the report could confuse some Catholics, especially on some of the church's core teachings. Headlines on the Vatican flooded the Italian papers today as mainstream media reported a supposed radical shift in the Vatican's position on homosexuality, divorce, and cohabitating couples outside of marriage. Today, Cardinal Wilfred Napier of South Africa refuted those headlines, saying any documents of the Synod is still a work in progress.
I saw some publication this morning saying the Synod was called to consider contraception, divorce and remarriage, same-sex marriage, and abortion. It wasn't called for that at all. It was about the family and the issues that face the family and how we're going to look at those honestly and deal with them as honestly and as effectively as we can.
One of the key topics among debate is how to welcome gay people into the church. The midterm Synod report says they have gifts to offer and that their partnerships, while morally problematic, can provide support. American Cardinal Raymond Burke, the head of the Vatican Supreme Court, says he and many other clergy members do not agree with the document.
The relatio to me is completely unacceptable. It attempts to address very serious pastoral questions, but without the proper theological criteria and with a lot of confused language.
Cardinal Burke says he's concerned that confusing language will be misunderstood by Catholics and the wider public. Much of the debate has not been about changing Catholic theology, but how the Church can better lead the faithful to the truth. Throughout the rest of this week, clergy members participating in the Synod will continue to meet in small groups and propose changes to the document. Cardinal Burke tells EWTN News Nightly he hopes that document is, quote, completely rewritten. Brian?
All right, Wyatt Goolsby, thanks for joining us. And as we continue our coverage of the Synod, Cardinal Christoph Schonborn, the president of the Austrian Bishops' Conference, is joining us from Rome, where the Synod on the Family is underway. Your Eminence, there are concerns among the bishops after yesterday's midterm report was made public. It's been discussed very openly. What are the bishops discussing today? What are the concerns that are involved here?
Well, first of all, I must remember that at every synod, the so-called relatio post, the relatio after the discussion, has been published. It never was secret. But perhaps the topic of the Synod is so fascinating and so urgent that there's much more attention than if it would be, I don't know, on Scripture as we had it some years ago. So I think for me it is a sign that this Synod touches a question that touches everybody in the world, because we all have a family. We have parents, mother and father, we have the larger family, and we have problems and joys and challenges in our families, and so everybody is concerned, and I can imagine that this is the reason why there is such a worldwide interest.
I wonder if you could tell us if there's division among the bishops on some of these issues, and how likely are we to see the final report reflect what we saw come out yesterday?
The real challenge is to bring together what should be and what is. We all know that we are on the way to be fully Christian. And many couples or many people living together, which is a phenomenon worldwide, we are discussing about that people live together without being married. But many of them are on the way. Some people are afraid, does the Pope change the doctrine? I can tell you, in 2000 years, never a Pope has changed the doctrine. Why should this Pope change the doctrine? But very often in the history, there were new challenges, and there are enormous new challenges about family life today. We have seen that today in our group on Africa. What a tremendous challenge for the African Church, the change from the traditional African culture to the modern great cities and their challenges. So I think the doctrine will not change. The doctrine is clear and the doctrine is beautiful, and it's possible to live according to the gospel.
We have a lot to look forward to, and we thank you very much for your time. Your Eminence, thank you.
Thank you. All the best. God bless. Goodbye.
We now turn to Ed Pentin, Rome correspondent for the National Catholic Register, for some analysis. Ed, you've been covering this synod very closely. This midterm report making headlines here. Phrases like seismic shift, stunning have been used. What's your sense of this debate?
Well, we're only halfway through the synod, Brian, and so we don't really know yet exactly how it's going to pan out. But at the moment, we're in a sort of work in progress. There's more to be said The relatio that came yesterday needs to be discussed, and that's what's going to happen this week.
Well, there's certainly some pushback from some of those involved in the Synod on what was released in this document. What are you hearing about the concerns of the bishops?
Well, there is certainly concern. Cardinal Napier spoke to the press today, and he said within his small group there was disappointment, dissatisfaction with the report. So these will be addressed this coming week, and people hope, the Vatican hopes, the Synod hopes, that these will be ironed out by Thursday when these groups give their final report, and then the final report will come on Monday, when they hope that all these issues will be resolved.
There are questions that are being asked here publicly that have probably never been asked before, but would you say that there's anything definitive really in this report, or are there just more questions?
These are really points of questions, points to be debated. But unfortunately, of course, the media will take it as a declaration of the Synod of Bishops, as a declaration of bishops. So there was perhaps a lack of foresight there on the Vatican's part for not being able to see that this is how the media would interpret it.
So the drama continues. How dramatic do you think it is? How much contention do you think that's going on within this synod from where you sit?
Well, certainly outside it, I mean, when you talk to people who've been following the church for many years, they've not really seen anything quite like this in modern times. It's a subject which is people are very passionate about, and causes great discussion and division too. So that's basically what we're seeing now. This is a kind of the fruit of the Synod. But this is what the Pope wanted. He wanted a debate. He wanted to cause a mess, as it were. And this is what's happened. And we all pray, of course, that this hope will come, good will come from this. And that's what the participants are hoping to, I'm sure.
All right, Ed Pentin, Rome correspondent for the National Catholic Register, with some analysis on the midterm report of the Synod on the Family in Rome. Ed, we appreciate your input. Look forward to having you back.
Thanks, Brian. Thank you.
And a little later on, we'll have more analysis with Dr. William Mattison, the Catholic University School of Theology Associate Dean. That's coming up later. Meanwhile, President Obama met with military chiefs from more than 20 coalition nations today. He says stopping the Islamic State will not be accomplished through traditional military means.
This is not a classic army in which we defeat them on the battlefield and then they ultimately surrender. What we're also fighting is an ideological strain of extremism.
At the meeting near Washington, the president also underlined the need for nations to cooperate in this effort. The U.S. has been pressing Turkey to make a more active or take a more active role in dismantling the Islamic State. Turkey launched airstrikes against Kurdish rebels within its borders today. Meanwhile, Kurdish fighters in Kobani say they're holding back Islamic State militants for now. The battle for the Syrian city is still raging despite more than 2 weeks of airstrikes by the U.S.-led coalition. This increases the concern over whether an air campaign will be enough to degrade and dismantle the extremist group. The fighting around Kobani has killed more than 500 people, forcing more than 200,000 to flee across the border into Turkey. Coming up, border clashes between India and Pakistan could serve as cover for terrorist attacks. An expert weighs in. And the Spanish region of Catalonia won't get a chance to vote for independence, at least not now. On Tuesday, October 14th, thanks for watching EWTN News Nightly. I'm Brian Patrick. Pakistani and Indian military officers were trading phone calls today instead of gunfire. There have been clashes in parts of Kashmir recently, a contested mountainous region claimed by India and Pakistan. Border skirmishes have been common for decades, but they've become more frequent and intense in recent weeks. About 20 people have died as the result of the most recent border battles. Both countries patrol a line of control that serves as a de facto border. Michael Kugelman is a senior program associate for South Asia at the Wilson Center, and we are glad that you're able to sort this out for us. This has been going on a long time in Kashmir, but what is the cause of the most recent flare-up?
Well, I think you have a military in Pakistan that is trying to assert itself over the government, and so it's looking to provoke provoke conflict. So I think that you had a case of the Pakistani military trying to provoke some sort of unrest in Kashmir. And you have an Indian government that is much more bellicose than the last one, and it is willing to retaliate. So essentially, in one case, you have a side that wants to provoke, and on the other, a side that's not going to back down.
So we've been focusing on ISIS in Syria and Iraq. You say that we really need to take a closer look here. Why?
Well, I mean, essentially, this is a part of the world where there is a lot of militancy and a lot of terrorism. And I think that you could have a lot of Pakistani militant groups that try to take advantage of this unrest in Kashmir in order to launch their own attacks in Kashmir and even across India as well.
So Kashmir is this disputed mountainous land. India and Pakistan claim it. How is the UN involved, and how might the U.S. act as a mediator in this difference?
Well, I think that the U.S., unfortunately, is not in a position to do much of anything, to be quite frank. I think that it's consumed by so many other matters, from ISIS to Ebola to so many other things, that I think that what it can do, what it would want to do, what Washington would want to do, is essentially to quietly get the two sides to talk about things and to try to stop the tensions and to try to get them just to talk and to stop all of the bellicose words and the bellicose actions.
They have relatively new leaders on both sides of this conflict, and we thought that might be a fresh start, but it hasn't turned out that way.
No, not at all. It's true. I mean, both of these leaders are, above all, focused on business and economics. They have an interest in having a relationship between the two countries. But unfortunately, in Pakistan, you have a case of a military that has always been the most important, powerful player in the state. And it really is not interested, unlike the Pakistani government, in reconciling with India. So here you have this provocation.
How interesting that the Nobel Committee awarded the Peace Prize to a Pakistani and an Indian. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the timing certainly is interesting in that regard. I think the intent here was to demonstrate that there are peacemakers in both countries that want to work for peace, both within each country and between countries. But unfortunately, given the tensions and the heated rhetoric and the troubled environment in both capital cities when it comes to how each regards the other, I don't think that these Nobel Peace Prize winners are necessarily going to serve as any sort of confidence-building measure. I wish, but unfortunately, I'm not optimistic.
Yeah, differences can be reconciled, but there needs to be a willingness. Michael Kugelman, Senior Program Associate for South Asia at the Woodrow Wilson Center, thanks for joining us tonight.
My pleasure.
And Spain's Catalonia region has called off a vote for independence, which was scheduled for November 9th. The leader of the secession movement suspended the vote after the Spanish government challenged its legality in a constitutional court. Separatists in the northeastern region of Spain have been trying for years to hold a breakaway vote. Polls show most Catalans support the vote, but only about half favor cutting ties with Spain. The head of the Vatican's Justice and Peace Office will lead a symposium on faith and farming in the U.S. next month. Cardinal Peter Turkson is an expert on the ethics of agriculture. The Faith, Food, and the Environment Symposium will address the challenges of 21st century agriculture from a faith perspective. And in Vancouver, Canada, a group of urban farmers takes great joy in bringing food production closer to where people live. Catherine Elliott reports.
A healthy harvest. That's the goal of a sustainable agriculture training program at the University of British Columbia.
I've been learning how to make the perfect pickle, which is actually very difficult, I think.
The 59-acre property produces over 200 varieties of fruits, vegetables, and herbs. Some of the farm's workers are motivated by concerns about climate change and food insecurity. Others see the ground and the gardening as a form of therapy.
We've had volunteers who, have gone through certain traumatic experiences themselves, and I think it's just a good place to come out and just clear their heads.
By getting their hands dirty. And it's not just for themselves. The farm is taking care of its neighbors, donating fresh produce to a home for people with disabilities down the road. They also give 30 local families a produce box each week filled with kale, radishes, squash, and other seasonal eats. It's a service that's growing into a passion for many.
Everything I learn about plants and everything I learn about the process and different systems, it just adds on to my passion for it, and makes me feel even more confident that that's something that I could definitely spend my life doing with joy.
Catherine Elliott, EWTN News Nightly.
Up next, we visit an after-school program for girls combining dancing and math. And what's the recipe for a long, happy marriage? The findings of a new study may surprise you. I'm Brian Patrick. Thanks so much for being with us on this Tuesday. Dr. William Mattison is Associate Dean at Catholic University School of Theology. There was a debate summary released today. How do you think it rounds out the midterm report that was released at the beginning of the week?
Yeah, Cardinal Tagle of Manila described yesterday's midterm report, which recounts the deliberations of the Synod Fathers over the previous week, as a sort of mirror that they could hold up to look at their deliberations and reflect upon them as the Synod continues. Well, if yesterday's document might be called a mirror, perhaps today's summary of debate that ensued after the release of that document might be likened to the sort of adjustments that we make when we look at ourselves in the mirror. So, for instance, in a couple of key places, I'd say that today's document rounds out some emphases of yesterday's document. It doesn't disavow anything. I don't want to overplay the discontinuity, but it completes the emphases of yesterday's document. So 2 areas that come to mind.
So this is a working document, and you point out that, that there's some sloppiness in this. Give us an example of what you mean by that.
Yeah. So keep in mind that this document that was released yesterday recounts the discussions from the previous 7 days. So as opposed to a normal church document that would be written over weeks, if not months or years, this had been written in a matter of hours. So there's one phrase in particular where the midterm report enjoins people to reach out and be accepting of people in irregular unions. And then it goes on to say that we should value their sexual orientation. Today's document explicitly seems to distance us from that and say that, of course, we should be welcoming and affirming of the dignity of all persons, but that doesn't necessarily entail valuing someone's sexual orientation of a same-sex union.
So did the summary that came out today, did it actually point to anything that might have been left out of the midterm?
Sure, yeah. I think there were certain important discussion items that were on the Synod discussion floor that were not mentioned in the midterm report. So, for instance, polygamy, a growing problem in Africa, surrogacy, injustices against women. It also mentioned one topic that I think has not featured prominently on the Synod floor, but is actually rather important, and the growing prevalence of pornography and what an impediment that is to Catholic teaching on marriage and the family.
There are a lot of issues being discussed. Thanks for clearing some of that up. Dr. William Mattison, Associate Dean at Catholic University School of Theology. Again, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Well, do dancing and algebra have something in common? Catherine Zeltner reports on an after-school program that combines the two.
Form a circle.
It may look like they're playing games, but these girls are doing geometry.
Perfect.
The combination is the brainchild of dancer and MIT graduate Kiran Sinha, who based her after-school program Shine on the theory of kinesthetic learning.
This concept that by moving and, by moving your body and using your brain simultaneously, you're able to better retain information. I couldn't recite the periodic table, but I can still play piano pieces or do dances to moves that I learned years and years ago.
2 units to the positive X direction.
The girls act out math problems using games and dance moves.
This one's you're going to reflect over an axis.
Sinha says the results speak for themselves.
We saw almost a 300% improvement in their math scores. We saw over 100% improvement in confidence. So much of what this program is about is not only getting girls' competency up, but a lot of it is about attitude, how they view themselves, how they view the field.
Before we had this, it was more of like, oh, the nerds do the math. You can still have fun, like doing the dance, and then you're less in that stereotype.
It's that change in attitude that Shine believes may be key to inspiring girls everywhere to stick with STEM.
I do think that this is the kind of programming that can help girls all over the country, regardless of where they are. It's a really exciting time of growth, and it's a real chance for us to change an entire generation.
Catherine Zeltner, EWTN News Nightly.
All right, thank you, Catherine. If you want a long, happy marriage, don't splurge on your wedding. A study from Emory University finds couples spending less on their wedding tend to have a longer marriage than those with those lavish celebrations. The study also finds a correlation between cheaper engagement rings and lower divorce rates. One possible reason, perhaps it relieves young couples from a financial burden that could strain their marriage. Well, until tomorrow, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, watch again on EWTN's YouTube page. For all of us at EWTN News Nightly, I'm Brian Patrick. Thanks for watching tonight. Good night, and God bless you.